learning lesson for me to grow and expound as a spiritual human being. I believe that I am an old soul.
Emma Watson, American Los Angeles accent. How do we feel?
I think it's pretty good. I heard that she really wanted to get into that accent. It was very important to her that it was authentic. I think she got the vocal fry correct. That's a doozy. Her performance in that is a real trip. That whole movie is a trip. I can't tell if it's a movie or a documentary. I don't know what's going on. But what are we talking about? We're talking about Stranger Than Fiction. It's the new cycle on Film Trace.
New set of eps. We're focusing on movies based on true stories, but more specifically, true stories that I think pretty objectively one could argue are, can be attributed to the old adage that they're stranger than fiction.
Stranger than me. I'm already going to bring in Chat GPT into this whole thing to figure out. I know that you hate that because you're a teacher, but I did cheat to see what Chat GPT said about Stranger Than Fiction. Shall I? Shall we see what Skynet says?
Oh, you enabler.
Yes, I love AI. It's the future. Stranger Than Fiction. The phrase is often used to describe real life events or situations that are difficult to believe, but are nonetheless true. It can suggest that reality can be more surprising or unusual than what we can imagine or create in fiction. That's pretty good. And that's not even the fourth version of the new one. That's the old version. Pretty good. What are we doing here? This is Film Trace. Should we do the stinger, as we called it?
Sure. I don't think that's the right word, but yeah, let's properly introduce the show for anybody that might be new to what we do here. You know our tagline a lot better than I do, Dan.
I know. We haven't done this for long. I forgot it. This is Film Trace. We trace the life of a film from conception to production to release and reception. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So we kind of dive deep into a film, analyze it, kind of figure out what it's all about. Stranger Than Fiction's the new cycle. This is our first episode. We're doing it kind of how we used to do it. The newest films first. We have a new one. Chris, what is it?
This is your pick, right?
It is my pick. Yeah.
You decided that after our long, well-deserved break, we'd come back and talk about Cocaine Bear for 45 minutes somehow.
The masterpiece that is Cocaine Bear.
Come on.
Well, remember the alternative was 65, which I saw last night.
That was my suggestion.
And because we want to do sci-fi. Sci-fi's probably going to play this here. Sneak peek. Unwatchable.
Really?
Basically an unwatchable film. So I'm glad that we chose Cocaine Bear, but it's not that much better when I'm thinking about it. Not that much better. Anyways, what do you want to do? How do you want to dive into this thing?
I mean, I feel like for this collection of episodes, we need to first start with the true story.
Sure, yeah.
And then talk about how it's fictionalized, dramatized for the screen. Because nearly every movie we talk about, and pretty much every movie that at least attempts to claim that it was based on a true story, even the ones that are straight up lying, like Fargo, tend to fictionalize way more than even perhaps like a creative nonfiction writer might.
Sure.
This is not like Devil in the White City or Killers of the Flower Moon, both being adapted right now, but neither of which have gone through that Hollywood treatment. And Cocaine Bear is a particularly interesting one to start with because its true story is like literally 2 sentences long. And of course, add to the fact that this is at least an attempt, I think. Is it fair to say it's an attempt at like a throwback exploitation flick?
Yeah, definitely throwback exploitation.
Okay.
Not a doubt. Yeah, I would agree with that.
So, and whereas most of the films we'll talk about during this cycle are movies that are at least attempting to try to resemble some kind of real truth and, portent, if you will.
Well, I mean, this is why I chose this.
My God.
Loaded suggestion because, we think about like, they're trying to depict something that's true. Or are they just using the veil of truth to bring some weight to the story they're trying to tell?
Yes.
Let's dive into Cocaine Bear and figure that one out.
Okay. I got the true story logline for us.
Do it.
It was originally reported by UPI. It's as simple as this. Cocaine was apparently dropped from a plane piloted by Andrew Thornton, a convicted drug smuggler who died September 11th of 1985 in Knoxville, Tennessee, because he was carrying too heavy a load while parachuting, died upon impact. The Bureau, FBI, said that there was also a bear found later that week in northern Georgia among 40 opened plastic containers with traces of cocaine that Thornton threw off before he jumped, knowing that he had too much to jump and survive, and he still biffed the calculation. And that's it. Like literally like the opening scene of the film and the fact that there is a bear that has ingested cocaine. Yeah. That's it. Everything else is fill in the blank.
Oh yeah, it's kind of genius. It's like I mean, it really is, because it's like you think of like, how do you want to start? It's like a writing prompt.
Yeah, that's true.
Here's the problem with that though, is that it's like this should be the end of the story, not the beginning, right? Like the whole thing. It's like going through the conception of this movie is hilarious. Like how Jimmy Warden, the screenwriter, came to find out about it via Twitter. He found out on a Twitter, whatever rant someone was going on. Then he went down a rabbit hole and looked at all these things and was like, oh, this is really fascinating. Elizabeth Banks gets involved a little bit later. It's almost as if the entire thing is kind of a joke, even to the people involved, oddly. Right. But it's funny enough or interesting enough to get through the gauntlet that is Hollywood production, which is mind-blowing. Because you think of all the people that have all these interesting ideas, all the artists, all the people who want to be writers, and it's basically a lark that gets through the studio system because it's stupid enough and zany enough where they're basically like, yeah, let's make this thing. It's different. It's weird. It's cool. It's gory. It's mind blowing, and the fact that it's sort of a true story is almost irrelevant on some level, maybe.
Well, like you kind of inferred, it's a hook, and essentially that's it, right? It's one of those outlandish, like weird news items. I feel like almost, tantamount to like a Jay Leno blip on one of his stupid segments back in the 90s, and. The thing that I am struggling with, and I know we've already mentioned this before we even chose to do a episode on the movie, is that it suffers whether you claimed it to be successful or not. Your mileage may vary, as is the saying, but how close, and I know we'll trace this more as we talk about the details of the production and marketing, but this is a real Snakes on a Plane, Sharknado type morass that otherwise seemingly talented people have got themselves involved in, right?
Oh, really? Okay, that's an interesting take.
I
like that take. That's interesting.
I don't, and this ties in also with my original claim at the end of our last episode in the Risque Romance series, which is that I always struggle with based on a true story movies because I would, and this is going to be like kind of my thesis statement that I'm going to keep coming back to. So get ready.
Yeah, I love it. I love thesis. Thesis.
Yeah, sure. Thesis, whatever. Is it when you are basing a fiction film on a true story, aren't you always going to, isn't it impossible to avoid exploitation at some level?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a tough one.
And I think that there may be exceptions to that rule.
You're going to have to have exploitation at some point. Because it's, Blingman's going to be a way better example of that later on at the end of the episode. But, I mean, it's tough. Yeah. I mean, you have a point. There's an entry point on that thesis, without a doubt. There's definitely a discussion that has to be had about taking somebody's story. In this case, it's a dead bear and a dead drug dealer.
Right.
So you're not really going to exploit anybody here.
Unless he legit, we don't know this guy's real story. Obviously, he's not the smartest person, but also he's a living, breathing human that had family, right? And,
true.
And can you imagine that you hear as well as his granddaughter or whatever,
his name is splattered over this whole thing over and over again.
Oh yeah, totally. And it's basically a joke cameo by Matthew Rhys Kerry Russell's husband, also longtime co-star from FX's The Americans, which also co-starred Margot Martindale, who's also in the film. And it's just like it's, you know, maybe something that is not on the frontal lobes of most people that watch it, but I can't help. And we'll talk about this, I'm sure, when we get to Dog Day Afternoon in the 70s, and Serpent and the Rainbow in the 80s, is like, there's these like magnificently strange stories that on their surface, like, it's fun to retell, and it's engaging, and there's entertainment and perhaps some art to be had from it. But I just keep thinking, like, can you imagine being this guy's granddaughter and you hear from like a friend at work or something? It's like, oh yeah, it was so funny. The guy like hits his head and goes unconscious before he even jumps out of the plane. And he's played by the guy from The Americans with like a big fake mustache.
It kind of begs the question. I know that they do it for a hook, and they're like, that's how the movie came to be, because it was just like a crazy true story, something Ripley's Believe It or Not. But yeah, it's like, couldn't you just, you know, we'll talk about this in the terminal about how taking a story and kind of doing what you want with it to kind of create something that's way more entertaining and way more just like a movie or narrative. It's kind of weird with this one. It's like, do you even need to have the guy, the drug dealer, fall out of the plane, die?
Right.
Do you really need that? You probably don't.
And you definitely don't need to use his real name.
No, of course not. But that gives it authenticity, don't you see?
So I don't know. I mean, let's dig into the production of this film.
So many good quotes.
I'm honestly still a little stuck. I did not really enjoy this movie, to be completely honest.
It was a masterpiece. No, I was actually floored by how bad it was.
Okay.
On a whole variety of levels.
So many mixed signals.
Yeah, it's bad. It's really, really bad it's not good. How did this come to be? I have some quotes. Can I say some quotes?
Go for it. Go for it.
This is Jimmy Warden, the writer. This is what he told Variety. It is my twisted fantasy of what I wish would actually happen after the bear did all that cocaine, end quote. Hollywood Reporter, it's not every day that a title comes your way that describes the movie in 2 words. You understand exactly what it is and what you want it to be. Okay, great. He also, this is like one of my favorite quotes about like him thinking about writing the script. He goes, I knew that the central character had to be a bear who did drugs. I had personal experiences with both halves, he adds. I've seen bears in the wild. And as for cocaine, I mean, who hasn't done it? It's just when you read
just as much of a joke as the movie itself.
I mean, but like, I'm sure that's probably the point, right? It's a lark. Everything's funny. Don't take it seriously. I get it. But like, there's just so many layers of blasé going on here that it's a little bit hard to swallow. Here's another one. What he's just nuts. This guy's. I felt like this movie could be the Bears' revenge story. That's Banks. That's Elizabeth Banks, the director.
Yeah.
What do we think about those? Just to start out with.
Well, it seems like, honestly, I think both of them are coming from different places. They're both being kind of blasé and flippant, but it does seem like Warden, whose only other credit is the sequel to the Netflix movie, The Babysitter, which is just like another kind of exploitation flick with like a modern sheen to it. And whereas Banks, I mean, I don't know. I keep wanting to give her a chance as a director. And it's tough. It's pretty amazing that, you know, she wasn't put in movie jail, as they call it, after flopping so hard with the Charlie's Angels remake.
Yeah.
And she's given but like the movie is relatively successful for an original story, right? Yeah. Not original in that somebody made it up, but original in terms of like no previous IP, right?
Yeah.
And yet she's I mean, there is a part of me that thinks like some of these jokes are almost worth it. Like I really do appreciate the joke of like she says how the importance of telling women's stories because it's a mama bear, right?
I can't take any of that seriously.
No, it's not meant to be taken seriously. And
I know, but then at the same time, she's also like walking this line. I can't even get into it. I mean, there's like so many quotes from these interviews.
Right. And so I think that as we tend to come back a lot when we talk about modern movies on this show is we have to mention the pandemic. And I think we've seen a lot of stories that have, been mined from the trauma and, succeeding despite the limitations and restrictions put on the movie industry by the pandemic. But then we also have an equal amount of people just like, I just want to have fun, right? There was that there's also movies that try to do both, like that. What was that one like small time IFC horror movie we talked about? We Need to Do Something.
Oh my god,
you remember that one?
Yeah, brutal watch, dude.
Tried to have its cake and eat it too, but then also like you have Bullet Train, which is complete trash, but there's tons of people like it's been in the top 10 most watched Netflix movies. Like I've got tons of students that are like obsessed with the movie, and it's also very much like arguably nothing more than a lark, like Cocaine Bear.
Well, but that's even different though, because you think of something like Bullet Train, where it's obviously a pandemic film, the way it was filmed and all that kind of stuff, and the way it was produced, but based on like a graphic novel, there is just sort of there's a level of intention there that doesn't exist here. Right?
Yeah.
There's a level of like an attempt to do something big and bold and different. It doesn't it doesn't like land or connect.
And it's still empty and hollow at the end of it.
I mean, it is, but like, I don't know. There was just a sort of ambition there that there's not really there's not much of an ambition here, is there? I mean, like, here's what he said when he wrote the script. I just wanted to entertain myself. Screw a studio. I didn't think people would actually read it. He's saying this as a former PA who worked with Lord and Miller in 21 Jump Street. So that's how this movie gets made, right?
Right.
He basically passes it along, goes through the whole thing. Lord and Miller get a hold of it. They're like into it. What does he say? Miller says, it was one of those things where you hear the concept and you're like, that's interesting, but is there a real movie in it? Then he goes on, but Jimmy did a great job making it into something that would be fun, better than you'd imagine for something called Cocaine Bear. There's also this, I've noticed in these quotes and interviews, there's this ping-ponging back and forth of this is a joke, whatever, but it's also like really fun and cool, but it's also just called Cocaine Bear and it is what it is.
Right.
It's like, I don't even know what you call that. It's like they're oscillating between take us seriously and this isn't interesting to this is a total joke.
I believe that's called cognitive dissonance, right?
Yeah,
and
sure,
it's also
Chomsky over here.
And it's also just like the nature of the beast for a movie that's hyped at this level, right? It wasn't at the same to the same degree, but like when Megan came out earlier this year, there was a little bit of that happening too, right? And that's also Universal, where they're trying to do the press junket to death, and eventually you're going to have some people like the screenwriter Akilah Hughes, who also did *Malignant*, who's a very intelligent person, but also like self-aware that she's writing, kind of throwaway garbage that just happens to be wildly entertaining.
Yeah. But I mean, you saw Megan, right?
No, I haven't yet.
Okay. So like Megan's an interesting point because it's Megan's pure camp.
Sure. Exactly.
The whole thing is, I don't know. It's like, I think I was listening to, who's it? Mark Commode today, who I always listen to, of course. And he was talking about Pearl. That just came out in the UK like this week, so that's why he's reviewing it. But he was talking about like pastiche, right? And like how it's so difficult to do well because you have to walk this tightrope, understanding genre, undermining genre, but you have to have a level of sincerity to what you're doing to do that, to do pastiche well, to do postmodern pastiche well. And that's like, I think that's and Megan's a perfect example because it does take itself seriously as a horror movie, right? There is an intention and non-irony to it, but the camp comes in and sort of, really adds a level of levity to the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, I don't know, it works. It works in that environment where you do a genre film, but you're constantly undermining it. And it's like, where would you put Cocaine Bear in that world?
Yeah,
would you say it's a pastiche?
No, I wouldn't, because there's just not enough there, which is too bad. Because once again, like Banks keeps saying things in the press that makes me want to give her more credit than I think we should. Yeah. She says that a lot of her inspiration for wanting to do this movie dates back to making Slither with James Gunn.
Oh, I didn't read this part. Yeah, that's interesting.
And that makes a lot of sense. Like, I think that is another like really good, solid example of camp where there is totally. And Gunn is a master at it and has proved that over and over again, to balance that, dramatic intention combined with the, absurdism. But here you also have Banks, not just making jokes about like telling women's stories, but also talking about how when she originally read the script, this goes back to the pandemic piece. She says, the world came to a standstill. Chaos was all around me, wiping down our groceries, and fires are raging in California. And I just thought, wow, there's no greater emblem of chaos than a bear high on cocaine. And she said that directing this film felt cathartic, like she could tame the chaos a little bit.
That makes me want to like the movie more.
I know, but you don't see that anywhere on the screen.
There's
exactly,
it's not there at all.
And there's like and this is one of those instances where like I feel like it airs more on the side of Snakes on a Plane than Slither, because I'm watching it and like they keep introducing characters, and like I was thinking like, oh, that'd actually be a pretty good running gag if they just like kept introducing characters throughout the whole movie. But no, it's just an overstuffed ensemble with like half-baked subplots and B storylines, and nothing ever congeals, and like it's just the script reeks of somebody that isn't taking things seriously, and yet the person behind the camera is taking things too seriously, and so you instead of getting that balance, you get that conflict, and it just like
that's a good point.
It just renders itself limp. I think
the thing that stood out to me immediately, after the opening scene with the guy jumping out of the plane and he dies, it's even that opening when the cops are there talking with each other.
Yeah, I
was like, why does this feel so dead?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It feels just sort of just leaden. It's just, there's no activity or excitement happening on screen. There's no pure cinema magic.
No, I would argue and I always have, one scene, even from the worst of films. And for Scream 5, it was the kid in the house, broad daylight.
Yeah.
That scene's wonderful.
Yeah, it's great.
The rest of the movie, not so much. And in Cocaine Bear, I finally like clicked for a few minutes in the movie when the Mexican standoff happens at the gazebo with Isaiah Whitlock Jr. on the roof. Sure. And there's actually like some fun interplay between the actors, and you can tell that they're kind of like riffing on each other. But then that's it. It's like there's like sprinkles of magic there, and and nothing else is happening all around it. And like,
I found out a little bit of that in the I forget the actor's name who plays the female forest ranger, but she's good, right? Like she kind of shows up and she owns those scenes for the most part. Yeah. I liked the paramedics and getting killed, and that whole sequence was kind of interesting and cool. I thought like the direction I thought was going to go in was when, other than the bathroom, they get jumped by the teenagers, and there's a like crazy gonzo fight that happens. I was like, oh, okay, like this is the direction it's going to go in. This is going to be fun, more of a romp type thing. But then it just dies. The next scene, it's just, there's no momentum. It doesn't keep going at all. I was actually knowing the budget, and the budget here between 35 and 40 million production budget doesn't look that way at all.
No, it doesn't.
I mean, obviously a lot of that went to the bear, which is, I would say very good CGI. Is the same company that did Avatar: Way of Water, the new one, Peter Jackson's company. So they did a good job with that, but I could not understand, especially like that opening scene when they're in quote unquote St. Louis, even though it's Ireland. And I'm just like, how? I always wonder, and we do these podcasts and we talk about these movies, and like, I'm not a filmmaker, you're not a filmmaker, so we don't really know how this stuff works. But it's like, how do you shoot a scene like that? Like him eating the spaghetti at the restaurant, at the bar. It's like, how do you shoot a scene like that and be like, oh yeah, this is good enough? Like this really, I watch this and I'm like, yeah, I like this movie. This is good.
This sings, right?
I just like, how do you do that? And it almost, I don't know. I get the sense that this is a rush production for some reason. Like it felt like they had to shoot this thing quickly. There's a lot of people involved. Maybe, when was this shot? Was it in 2021?
I believe so,
I'm trying to figure out. I don't even know. It's somewhere in the notes. But it's still during the pandemic, right? So it's like, maybe they just got a compressed schedule or something. There's got to be some explanation. Have you seen Charlie's Angels or the Pitch Perfect 2 or other two movies?
I've seen Pitch Perfect 2. I have not seen the new Charlie's Angels. I think that there's like, at least with the Pitch Perfect movies, right? The thing about those is they're also ensembles, but even when the story limps along, you can fall back on kind of the songs and the comedic performances. And that's another thing here is like, I really do like Kerry Russell as a dramatic actor, but she doesn't have many comedic chops, and nor does what's his guy, the guy who plays Ray Liotta's son.
Alden
Aaron. Yeah, I don't know. Some people are all about him, and maybe he's just not given enough material because he is very funny in Hail Caesar.
He's great in Hail Caesar,
right? Yeah. So I think I do think it largely comes down to the script and the overstuffed half-bake aspect of it. And I think you're right. I think that perhaps because there is a breeziness to it, there was the intention of thinking like that would add to like the larkness of it all, but it ends up just not making it feel really memorable enough. This is not a movie that even as like get together with friends, watch a bad movie night would merit much rewatch value, right?
No, I don't think so. I mean, but the thing about that though is when you look at some of the like production notes on it, it seemed as though Banks wanted to make, like you mentioned, it's like an exploitation film. And like to some degree, I would say it sometimes rises to that occasion. There's certain scenes with the gore and stuff like that. But I thought there was a funny quote that came up. I think it was one of the Universal, or actually it was Lord and Miller, when Banks was pitching this. She came with a pitch deck, and they're like, she had a pitch deck. It was pretty gory. It had lots of body parts and internal organs in it. And then Banks goes, I don't recommend anybody to do this, but if you go down the internet hole of looking at an actual animal attacks on humans, it's fucking gnarly as shit. Then she says, I love gore. I grew up on Evil Dead. The gore is the fun part of the ride. But when I'm watching this, and I'm a big gore fan, and I think I can be, I compare this to the new Evil Dead trailer, which is just phenomenal. And I'm laughing through the entire trailer. This 2-minute trailer, I laughed more than the entire Cocaine Bear. Right? I'm not even joking. It's not even close. Yeah. So I do wonder where the mark was missed here, because it sounds like Banks had the right intention in being like, we got to go over the top. We got to do a ton of gore. We have to have kids do cocaine in the first 15 minutes of the movie. Yeah. To like break all of these social norms, to loosen people up. But then there's no payoff. There's no punchline. Right. Like there needs to be something more, I guess. I don't know.
And, Russell talked about this too in her mind. It was a positive light, talking about how, part of Banks's part of the reason that it's very easy to work with Banks is because she's very confident and organized. And she references like her part in Wet Hot American Summer and her connection in all those movies from David Wayne and the Stella guys. And, in those films, it's like literally like jokes, like absurdity packed into every, shot.
Sure. And
here, because there's so much like story and attempts at character drama and development, there really is no room left for that. And I also think that because she's really good to work with as a coworker, as an employee, she's not going to do much to like mess with Warden's script, even though he's not a really known entity. She just kind of fell for it and just like wanted to put it on the screen faithfully. And I think that this is a movie more so than most that would really benefit from like loosening up on set and letting some things happen that that would be weirder than what's on the page. That would be more left field, right?
That's interesting. Yeah, that's a good point too, because Banks comes across to me, and I got to walk a fine line because I don't want to come across as like a sexist or chauvinist here, but like she, in the interviews, it's quite clear that she is a very accomplished and amazing businesswoman.
Yes.
Business person, whatever you want to call it. She's a producer. She runs a game show. Even there's asides in some of like, I think this is Vanity Fair about how they talk to her friends. And she's the type of person who she puts together a party, and she's the person going around making sure everybody has a drink. And so she's very like thoughtful, but like always kind of being the point person and being in control. Right.
Yeah.
And then it's almost like the lifelessness of this movie feels like it's like, to your point, maybe it's too constrained throughout the entire thing. Like they're too close to the script, like you mentioned, maybe, but there's not enough play going on. And it's like, it's so fascinating that you bring up her background, because, all of those movies are interesting, even Role Models, which is not a good movie. But it's a really fun movie and works. Super rewatchable. Because you could tell that like that's just complete improv for the most part.
Yeah.
Do you feel, I guess the question, do you feel like there's improv going on here?
If there is, it's very limited. Like this Mexican standoff scene, like that seems like there was definitely like it was a little looser around the edges in a good way. Like that's without being like going full Apatow and adding another 90 minutes to the runtime.
Yeah.
But like other than that, I don't know. Like it like you were describing like the St. Louis scene, and it's like I barely remember that, and I saw this movie
terrible.
2 weeks ago. Like
it's so bad. Like I was watching this, and I was like, how is this in a major movie that cost $40 million? Like it's just, I think someone brought this up on Letterboxd. I kind of want to like dip down into like, because I don't want to feel like we're the only people like attacking this movie, because we're not.
What does it got on Letterboxd? Like a 2 point something, 3 point?
Not high. Actually, what did it have on Letterboxd? I haven't read this down. 64 per. It's not that. 64 is not bad.
Okay.
What are this? Oh my God, some of these things. Probably would have been a decent goof off horror comedy if it was made with any amount of humor or basic filmmaking craft. Okay, brutal. Missing a few key ingredients here. There's another Sharknado. This is another Sharknado scenario. Somehow still lazy garbage, even though the cast and crew had the resources available to make something worthwhile. Not that I totally agree with that, but there is some hint of like, you had tons of money, you had a great cast, you had an interesting idea.
Yeah, but it's been proven over and over again, though, that it really doesn't matter how much money you have. It matters the ingenuity and the chemistry and the vision,
the writing,
and the writing. Ultimately, yeah.
You got to start something. You got to start with a strong foundation. The foundation always comes in the storytelling and writing. I don't know. Maybe I haven't read this script, so I don't know. Maybe the script is way better than this. Also, that the period piece angle of this is hardly even used.
I know, it's
right?
Too bad.
It kind of just looks like hipsters walking around
there's not
a
even
national
like
park, a forest.
There's not even like any really good hard hitting needle drops. Than
someone mentioned that too.
Yeah.
That the music was really odd, and I noticed it too.
Yeah, totally.
Like, this is it felt very like just flaccid. The music, it just doesn't. There's no conjuring of like deep synths or something from the 80s. It just.
I will say, like the pop songs, but one of the only things my friend of the pod Riley and I saw it together, and you know, it was nice to like hear a little bit of Mark Mothersbaugh, the guy from Devo, doing the soundtrack. Used to do all the scores for Wes Anderson. But yeah, I mean, I think that like it's when you even have Mark Mothersbaugh doing your music and it's still like not fully clicking, then you know that there's like something off.
How about this Hollywood Reporter review? They said no thoughts, just vibes. I don't think I'd agree with that.
No,
because what vibes are here?
And that, I mean,
the vibes are ambient.
Notwithstanding the fact that that word is, you know, lost all meaning over the past several years.
I think it's gained meaning personally. How about BBC? It's definitely better than Banks's last film, Charlie's Angels, but you can't help get the feeling that she's done the bare minimum.
Oh my God.
So good. BBC really not doing so hot these days. That's pathetic.
Public broadcasting.
That's like Evening Standard writing. That's a little London news joke for you guys. What else? Do you have any reviews you want to kind of pop in here? What do you got?
No, I do. The one other thing that I think is worth mentioning that is maybe kind of a good microcosm of the whole problem with this movie is that Banks, you know, basically made an ultimatum because Universal was searching for other working titles.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm out if we don't just call it Cocaine Bear. And on the one hand, it's like, no, you know, once again, people pleaser, accommodating. The writers got the right idea from the beginning. On the other hand, it's like, yeah, I mean, there is at least an attempt at camp there, but you also like run the risk of turning this into like more of an empty joke than it already is. Because like it was, you know, within weeks after the trailer that Cocaine Bear came out, all of a sudden Meth Gator is in development. Yeah. And it's just like, we're going to go down this rabbit hole, just like we did with Sharknado. And
that's sad. I have a postscript to your quote.
Okay.
So Banks says, yeah, I'm not going to do this unless you call it Cocaine Bear. Then she goes on. She goes, I lived through Zach and Miri make a porno. Sorry. That title is a problem, she says. But I think Zach and Miri make a porno would be like whatever nowadays. I don't think anyone would even shy away from it because words don't matter anymore. She laughs. Words don't really matter anymore. In a single paragraph, we have gone from I refuse to do this movie unless it was called Cocaine Bear to words don't mean anything. Like that's to me is the film. It's sort of like I get the intention is there, the concept's cool. You have all these elements there, but there's just I think there's no deeper purpose to making this movie. I don't want to sound like every movie has to have this deep, artistic, passionate heart to it. But on some level, it kind of does. Like someone has to want to tell the story and make it, even if it's a dumb comedy or whatever. And that doesn't exist here. And you can tell it on screen in every single shot. There's just not a fire here to tell a story. It's just kind of a gag.
Yeah. And I like she's really good when she's on screen with, you know, the weirdness happening behind the camera. But it really just like gives off if we're talking about vibes, ultimately the vibes I get from this, now that we're talking about it, I've come to the realization, you know, when like the popular kids at school try to make something funny.
Yes, that's exactly what this is like.
It's just like, oh, okay, you don't have, you're normie. You don't have the weirdness that's required to make this work.
The funny people are like the burnouts, like Bill Hader was in high school, who got like D's, straight D's. Those are the funny people. Right. All right. What about Bling Ring?
Okay, our chaser.
Have you seen this before?
I did. I saw it when it first came to streaming, not theatrically. It was a hotel movie. It was a throw it on. It's on HBO.
That sucks.
And like, I like Sofia Coppola generally.
Yeah.
I always think it's interesting what she's up to in any given movie, even if I don't personally think it works.
Yeah.
But when I first saw it, it was very much just like, okay, yeah, that's exactly what I thought it was going to be. And not much more. And I don't think I really got that much more in my 10-year rewatch either. What about you?
Interesting. Never seen it before.
Okay.
So I had, when did this come out? 2013. Yeah. So I think I saw her 2010 movie. What was that called? Somewhere, I think.
Yeah, that's one I still haven't seen.
And I saw that in the theater. I was super hyped for it. It was an art film. It wasn't in a lot of places. And I sought it out. I went to go see it and I was pissed off afterwards because I was like, this is so bad. And like, I love Virgin Suicides. I'm indifferent about Lost in Translation. But because of Virgin Suicides, I will always give her another chance, no matter what. And so that's actually, I watched this maybe 2 months ago, and sitting there and watching this film is a bizarre experience because it doesn't really feel like a movie. It almost feels like a docudrama where she's sort of filming what she thinks happened. And then she intercuts with it feels like actual quotes from the people involved in interviews, obviously played by actors. It walks such a weird line between truth and fiction that I think it's just a fascinating case. It's only shot or made, 5 years after this happened. So, it's a group of teenagers who basically in the 2008, 2009 in California and Los Angeles who kind of find a way to burglarize famous people's homes by following them, essentially. And, they're going to be out of town. They're going to be in Tahoe or whatever. And so they know that they're going to be out. So they go to their homes and just rob them. Paris Hilton, Lindsay Lohan, Orlando Bloom, all of those types were robbed in this. So it was a huge headline grabbing story, right? It was
and I think one of the important details is that there's no actual breaking and entering happening, right?
Just walk in, right?
Yeah, these celebrities think that they live in this gated community. Nobody's gonna just jump the fence and walk in the front door, or Paris Hilton famously left her key under the mat and it was easily found. So there's very little, if not any, violence happening. No destruction of property, just coveting and stealing. So I do think that aspect of it, and it's interesting because you switched what our chaser film for this episode was going to be.
I did.
And before you switched it, I had chosen, we're going to go all the way back to 1959 by the end of this cycle of episodes with Compulsion, the famous Loeb and Leopold case, which is basically the origin of a variation on the term affluenza. Right.
Yeah.
The boredom of wealth that drives people to do crime, and there's literally little to no other motivation behind it. Yeah. Though, of course, and this is, I think, where things get a little bit dicey, even though they at least prompt discourse with this movie, is how much of this does it seem like Coppola is attributing to their wealth and boredom and privilege versus a legit critique of social media and social capital. Which is I don't know how I feel about that, especially 10 years later.
Well, it's interesting because I think that was one of the critiques as the movie came out. They were sort of where is the criticism here? Where is the edge? Where is the deeper truth about what this is all about? Because it's shot and acted so flatly, that there's just not a lot. The sort of artistry of it's in the construction and the aesthetics, not in the writing.
Right.
And so that's where it becomes pretty difficult to be this is saying this or this is saying that, but our guy Richard Brody. From the New Yorker.
Oh boy.
He has this great kind of quote about it. He goes, in the Bling ring, she cast her net wider than ever, delving into the irresistibly fascinating representations of the age, the banal simulacra of selfhood, from which both ordinary social life and actual celebrity are made. Daring to face these often noxious, seemingly empty phenomena on aesthetic terms and taking on a degree of their flatness and simplicity, Coppola renders them surprisingly substantial. I 100% agree with him. I 100% agree with him, because I was watching this and I'm just like, I don't understand what I'm watching, because it comes across almost like a Lifetime movie, but there's something odd in the detachment of it feels so detached from like any messaging, any sort of moral, oh, this is bad, oh, celebrity culture is awful and it hurts things and social media is terrible. None of that's here, right? There's nothing in the characters or how things play out that suggests that. But in the way she sort of constructs it and shoots it, it does come across as sort of this, there's this almost imperceivable rot that's happening in that sort of, in that aesthetic viewpoint, the glassiness of it all. And it's just, I don't know, there's something beautiful about the film. And maybe I'm just trying to make up for her other movies that are terrible that I don't like. And I just really want to like another movie like Virgin Suicides. But I don't know. This film has stuck with me. I keep thinking about this movie after I saw this like maybe a month ago. And it keeps popping up in my head. And I'm just like, why? The choices here too are so fascinating. Have you seen anything she's done since? Like, what's the other one she did?
I really like her remake of The Beguiled.
Okay, yeah,
the old Clint Eastwood movie.
Yeah.
I haven't seen On the Rocks yet. I've heard it's terrible.
I haven't seen it either.
Rashida Jones, Bill Murray. But this is perhaps a hot take, and I'm anticipating your big groan. My favorite film of hers is Marie Antoinette.
Okay.
Yeah, there it is.
I mean, it's okay. It's like whatever.
I think that movie does everything that she was trying to like recapture in a modern sense with the Bling ring, but with way more flair and aesthetics and like actual pomp and circumstance, as the subject of the biopic necessitates. But there's just way more. There's way more to like enjoy and wrestle with, and here it just feels like you said, it's flat, and that's part of the point, but because it's so flat, it like feels so wispy to me that I don't remember it. Like the only once again, here's my one exception to even movies that I dislike, the ingenious long static shot nighttime of, I forget, is that Orlando Bloom's house, where there's no sound.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah,
we
it's beautiful.
Just see them
beautiful
go
shot.
from room to room. Yes.
Yeah, it's all lit up.
Lovely. Yeah. And I think that's, if there was more of that in the movie, it could have been more engaging to me and more intriguing. I think also that flatness kind of, for me, straddles the line of, is this flat on purpose, or is it like she just picked mediocre actors? I don't think any of them really do that great of a job, and I think that perhaps there's a reason we haven't really seen any of them do much of anything since then, besides Emma Watson.
I think she does that on purpose, though.
Yeah,
I think she chooses people that don't necessarily don't pop off the screen, right? None of them do. And they seem like they're just these side characters in their own lives or something. Yeah. Like there's just no, who's the protagonist here? There's not really a protagonist.
No, it's the guy.
I mean, yeah, I guess. But then it jumps to like these different scenes where it's focusing on different characters that he's not involved in.
True.
Right. So it's kind of like, it's that omniscient third person type situation. But I think, I don't know. I kind of give her a little bit of credit. I think there's way more here than people are seeing. That's what I think. Okay. And that, like, it's based on a Vanity Fair essay.
Yeah.
That she read on vacation, of course. Which is just thinking about this whole thing, like her being on vacation. She has a stack of magazines. She's picking up Vanity Fair. It's like, oh, I can't put this down. Let me write a screenplay about this. She's obviously lives in a very heightened state of affluence.
Yes.
And I mean, that's her family, all that kind of stuff. But also her own work. It's not like she's not making money off her movies and stuff. Probably not that much stuff, now that I think about it.
No, she's probably making more off wine, just like her dad.
Just like her dad.
Okay, so here's kind of my capstone question.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Going back to this theme of like exploitation, there is in her interviews regarding the film, Coppola says pretty empathetically that like at the very least, like she thought like, oh, these kids were doing actually took some ingenuity, right? Yeah. Which is fair. And yet there is still, like you said, like literally using, pull quotes in the dialogue.
Yeah.
And then she also has, and this is part of that glassiness thing that our guy Brody was talking about. She's got this distant connection to it, because even though overall she's a younger director and she's got more of a feminine point of view than most people that would otherwise take on this story might have, and the cast is majority young women. But she says straight up, I don't really know kids like the ones in this story. We went to LA clubs and stuff when we were working on it. Everyone was on their phones and texting and photographing themselves. And I wanted to have that feeling, but no, this world was pretty exotic to me.
What?
Right.
That makes no sense.
Yeah, because you think that she would fit pretty seamlessly.
100%. Like she's from extreme affluence.
But it's, is this now, she's technically a Gen Xer, right?
Yeah.
So there is that generational divide that is perhaps happening here, where it's once again like, we do this too as millennials, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like you look at it with, you're othering, right? You're othering this entire group of people. And so aren't we thereby then, like, I feel like that's dangerous, because then she also talks about like one of the pull quotes that is used from Israel Broussard's character is, when he's getting questioned by the authorities, and he says that he kept focusing in the interview about how many Facebook followers he had gained since the story went viral. And I think that there's an argument to be made that can be dangerous to once again shift so much of the blame onto social media writ large, rather than like the actual like class issues that should be more at the forefront with this story, but that are perhaps lost because, like you said, the one thing that Sofia Coppola and these kids do have in common is extreme wealth.
Yeah, I don't think she would ever. She's able. That's just not capable of it, but like she doesn't have the lived experience to really.
Yeah, she doesn't have that vantage point. Right?
No, it's like impossible on some level. I don't know. I love it. I think it's fantastic. It's so much better than Cocaine Bear.
That I'll agree with. I can't. Yeah,
second best film she ever made. Sure. Thanks.
No, maybe fourth. Okay.
Do we have some trivia? Don't we have like a closing segment?
Yes. New closing segment. This concept of stranger than fiction got me inspired. So here's what I'm going to do, Dan. I'm calling this Left Untraced Trivia, because there's plenty of other films from the 2010s that fit under the stranger than fiction umbrella that we weren't able to touch on, since we just focused on Bling Ring and then Cocaine Bear for our new release. I'm going to describe a film to you. Sure. You are going to tell me whether that film exists or not. No. Is it fact? They did create a movie. And
did that movie exist? Is it a movie or not? Okay.
Is it a movie or not? Fact or fiction? Exists or doesn't exist? Okay, here's number one. We're going to start in the year of 2011. So you do get a little clue. Year of release.
Sure.
2011. From the guy that directed the original Crazed Bear movie, The Edge, starring Alec Baldwin and Anthony Hopkins, and featuring the dude who played Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter's mentor, played playing now an army lieutenant and former school companion of Saddam Hussein's son, Uday Hussein, who is violently coerced into becoming Uday's body double. He gives an insider's look into the life of the Iraqi tyrant.
Oh my God.
Does that movie exist?
I'm going to say no.
It does exist. Fact. You're 0 for 1 right now, Dan.
Awful.
The Devil's Double starred Dominic Cooper. It was directed by Lee Tamahori and made $4.8 million at the box office.
Mad Libs movie.
I know, right? And once again, true story. Stranger than fiction.
Stranger than fiction. All right.
This kid
was
hired to be the body double for Saddam Hussein's son. Okay, 2012. From the director of HBO's somehow just as problematic as the original Lolita remake, the woman that played the blonde that Tom Hardy disguised himself as in A Dream in Inception stars as Rebecca Spite, a Nebraskan eBay wunderkind that sells a 3-year-old chicken McNugget shaped like George Washington for $8 million, only to get sued by McDonald's for libel.
I feel that does feel like a movie to me. So
you're 0 for 2, Dan. You're 0 for 2.
Oh, man.
That one I made up. If I were to make that movie, I would call it Presidential Poultry. Groaner, I know. Okay. You still have a chance.
That one sounds fun, though. I feel like kind of like
thank
that
you.
one.
I know. I almost went with the director of the Greg Kinnear movie, The Founder, but I thought that would be too on the nose.
Yeah.
But speaking of Greg Kinnear, here's 2014.
2014.
You still have a chance to win. You're 0 for 2, but there's 3 left. The screenwriter of Braveheart directs Greg Kinnear, Thomas Hayden Church, and Cocaine Bear's very own Margot Martindale in an adaptation of the quote-unquote true story of a 4-year-old that undergoes risky emergency surgery and miraculously comes out the other side saying he went to heaven and came back. The film reportedly paints the child as a messenger of God and not the heretic he truly is.
True.
Yeah, you know this movie, right?
Yeah, I know that movie. Yeah,
okay, good. You're 1 for 2.
1 for 3.
1 for 3. I don't know how to do math. Heaven is Real was the name of that movie.
Yeah, I remember seeing like the trailer for that. I was like, what's going on
so insane. So insane. $102 million that movie made.
That's an A+ cinema score guaranteed.
Reminding us all of the stranglehold Christian nationalism has on this country.
Seriously. Welcome to fascism. All right, keep going.
2016. The first feature from a Rhodes Scholar has yet to make a follow-up. His original feature debut centered on Daniel Radcliffe as an FBI agent that, under orders from his boss played by Toni Collette, goes deep undercover with a white supremacist gang led by an alt-right talk radio host played by Tony-winning playwright Tracy Letts that has stolen illegal radioactive isotopes. The film was a New York Times critics pick and sits on Rotten Tomatoes with a more than respectable 84%, but it only made $300K at the box office.
Oh my God. This is really tough. I'm going to say that's false.
No, that movie exists.
How does that movie exist?
It's
Toni Collette. That's something that threw me off. I can't see Toni. She's looking for a paycheck. What's going on?
I know. Like playing.
What's going on?
That's the movie's called Imperium. The director is Daniel Ragusis.
I sort of vaguely remember this. What is Radcliffe doing these days? Jeez.
It was one of those. It was from Lionsgate, so I believe it was one of those movies where like Lionsgate was one of the first studios to try to the VOD stuff. And so like they put it out, it bombed in the first weekend, so they pulled it and put it on VOD.
Oh, now I remember the poster. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, last one.
Redeem myself here.
Yeah, redeem yourself. At least end with a 2 out of 5. 2018. This month marks the 5th anniversary of the release of the first non-dystopian YA adaptation effort of the visionary filmmaker behind the Maze Runner trilogy. Brad Pitt produced and spearheaded the project because he wanted to bring to the world the story of Ötzi the Iceman, whom he has a prominent tattoo of on his arm. The world's oldest known natural human mummy, all that is known is that he was likely killed by an arrow from behind. Taking cues from Apocalypto and 300 alike, this trashy historical thriller features a largely no-name cast, but a cameo by Michael Fassbender as the German hiker that discovers Ötzi's body in 1991.
No freaking way.
Yeah, that's fiction. I made that one up.
I knew it. It was too much. The Brad Pitt tattoo is a giveaway.
That is Brad Pitt's tattoo, though.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh my God! So I got that wrong. So just give me.
But no, he didn't greenlight a movie about his tattoo.
What? Oh my Lord! It just goes to show you, there's a million different stories every day. That you could tell.
If I were to make it, I would call it The Iceman Frometh, Brad's Tat. origins. 2 colons in there.
It's funny because all of these sound more interesting than Cocaine Bear.
Thank you. All right, maybe I'll write
really
a script and send it to Elizabeth Banks.
They really do. What do we got coming up next week? What are we doing?
I'm excited because I just learned you were watching this movie for the first time for our upcoming episode. It's Nicholas Winding Refn's Bronson, starring Tom Hardy from 2008, with a little chaser of The Terminal by Steven Spielberg.
What a double header! I watched these 2 movies back to back, by the way.
Oh my god, that's a 1-2 punch if ever I heard of one.
All right, so stay tuned next week. You can hear my reaction to that. Thanks for listening. This has been Film Trace.